Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka Michael A-Hole Jordan, and in this video we're going to be breaking down episode 6 of Marvel's What If. The entry has several Easter eggs that call back to the beginning of the MCU, and throughout this we'll be talking about the hidden details, things you missed, and also giving our thoughts for where the series could be going in the future. Because of this, there's going to be a shitload of spoilers, so if you haven't had a chance to check it out, then I highly recommend that you check out now. If you enjoyed the video, then please smash the thumbs up button, and make sure you subscribe for a partnership between us that's going to be more iconic than Killmonger and Tony Stark. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into the video. Okay, so the episode is heavily tied into not only the beginning of the MCU, but also Black Panther. Michael B. Jordan returns as Killmonger, who is regarded by many as being the best baddie in the entire Infinity Saga. In the same year that Thanos rocked the universe in Infinity War, Michael B. was picking up Best Villain trophies at the MTV Movie Awards, and it's clear his character left a big impression. Not only does this see the return of several dead characters such as Tony Stark and Killmonger, but we also get Ulysses Claw, which Andy Serkis teased at on his Instagram the other day. Now we pick up in the Kunar province of Afghanistan to see Tony Stark travelling back from the Jericho missile demonstration for the US government. Not to get too wokey, but I've always viewed Iron Man as a metaphor for the Iraq War, the war on terror, and the occupation of the Middle East and Asia. Don't click out yet, but listen, now in the first Iron Man film, it was very much about a man who sold weapons in Afghanistan, realising how bad it was. Though there's a lot of people who think the MCU only started doing social commentary recently, that movie very much set the stage for how superheroes would operate if they existed in real life, and the issues that they would all wrestle with. After seeing firsthand the damage that had been done, he decided to take not only his company, but also his personal drives and ambitions in a completely different direction. Up until this point, his genius had been used for personal gain at the expense of others, whereas he realised that he should try and help the world rather than hinder it. Western might is something that could be used in a positive or negative way, and it's interesting to see how things are changed up for this episode with his path completely changing. Now this shot is actually the first thing that we ever got in the MCU, and it's amazing how the creative team have perfectly managed to recapture the scenes. The entire sequence is pulled directly from the opening of Iron Man, and it works so well. I placed the opening side by side here so you can see how they line up, but we watch the Funvi convoy as it moves through the desert, before travelling inside of it to see Tony taking a photo with a fan. Tony mocked the idea of peace because he'd be out of the job with it, but throughout the saga he changed his mind and often used peace as a driving force for most of his actions. Upon leaving the cave in the first Iron Man film, the first thing he did to the helicopter was hold up two fingers to symbolise this change. In the Senate hearing during Iron Man 2, he also held up two peace signs and used the phrase "peace in our time" when talking about why he and Bruce needed to create Ultron. This all came full circle in Avengers Endgame when Tony fully buried the hatchet with Captain America. Upon returning to Avengers HQ and giving him the shield, he said that all he wanted was peace, and I love how this entire thing comes full circle from this. Now the first time we were introduced to Tony, his hand was holding a glass of whiskey, and the subtext of this scene painted him out as an egotistical and self-centered character who was only really out for himself. The MCU is great at bringing things full circle, and though it might not have been intentional, I've always loved the way that we were introduced to Tony with him doing something self-centered with his hand, which juxtaposes his death, in which he does something with his hand that's for the betterment of everyone. Yes, it's a reach, but back to the episode. Now after the convoy is attacked, we see as the ride is fired upon and Tony flees the vehicle to hide behind a rock. I believe he calls Obadiah Stane, who we learn in Iron Man was actually behind the attack. It's at this point he comes face to face with his legacy when a missile lands and we see the Stark Industries logo emblazoned on the side of it. This iconography would later be brought up in Age of Ultron and WandaVision when Wanda talked about her childhood trauma in which one of Stark's missiles was used to kill her parents. Again, looking at all these moments side by side, they line up so well, and it really shows the attention to detail that Marvel have put into this show. Now whereas in the original film, shrapnel from it embedded itself into Tony's armour and then cut through to his heart, Tony is saved by Killmonger, who arrives and throws the missile away. Here are two very important distinctions, as this was the first time that a suit of armour saved Tony's life, whereas in What If he's of course saved by Killmonger, and they go on to strike somewhat of a partnership. Now during this moment in the main timeline, the MCU version would go on to create a miniature arc reactor, and it does kinda annoy me that he didn't call it the Stark reactor. Come on, yeah, get some branding involved. Now interestingly, Killmonger's father's ring, which he wore around his neck, is missing, but we'll talk about that more later on in the video. Killmonger actually mentions in Black Panther that he was operating in the Middle East, so it makes a lot of sense that he would appear in this intro. When fighting T'Challa, he said,
"I killed in America, Afghanistan, Iraq. I took life from my own brothers and sisters right here on this continent. And all this death, just so I could kill you."
Killmonger was a highly decorated Navy SEAL, and it's great seeing him back in the same soldier's uniform that he showed up wearing in Wakanda. It's one of the coolest character designs in the MCU for me, and I'm so glad to see it back. Now we learned that Killmonger had actually infiltrated the Ten Rings, which were of course the organisation that kidnapped Tony Stark. The Ten Rings also popped up recently in Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, and we learned that the criminal empire had been built by Wenwu over the centuries. Now we discover they're heading inbound, but Killmonger saves the day, and thus Tony retains some of his more charming personality traits. Cut to a shot of the MCU version in which he hammered away in the cave and created the Mark I armour. This black vest that we see is very important, and it has appeared at several points throughout the saga, including Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3 and Avengers Endgame. It tends to be used when Tony is at his weakest point and he needs to build his way out of something. The sound of his hammering also appeared at the end of Avengers Endgame as the credits rolled, and with the multiverse opening up, there is potential for his return. Now in my first video I said this might be Killmonger due to it being a bad image, but you know, your boy takes L's too, so shout out to everyone who said I was wrong. You got me. Now next we get the infamous Avengers Assemble shot and close out on Tony's final act. These are all perfectly recaptured by the What If animators, and it makes you realise how much the MCU would change without the character. Now his first film of course ended with a press conference with him announcing to the world that he was Iron Man. Here we see a similar scene, but instead he's announcing to the world that Killmonger is here. With him is Obadiah Stane and also Pepper and Happy. I love how they sneer at Killmonger as they sort of have him sussed out, and we learn throughout the episode that he can't fool everyone. Now it turns out that Tony has promoted him to the Chief of Security, and as we know from Iron Man 3, Happy would end up becoming Head of Security, which he remarks was meant to be his job. Now rather than learning any introspective lessons from the cave, this Tony states they need to build bigger and badder. Amongst the journalists you might also recognise Christine Everhart, who did a big spread on Tony in the first Iron Man movie. She correctly figured out that Tony was Iron Man, and at the press conference when he announced it, she was the only one who didn't stand up because she already knew. Again, she asks the tough questions, and it was actually Christine that spurred Tony on to act when she presented him with the photographs of his weapons. Killmonger reveals he knew of the assassination op, and Obadiah panics and tries to shut it down. However, the man has brought the receipts, and amongst them we see the Ten Rings logo. In the centre are two swords, and you might have noticed in the post-credits scene of Shang-Chi that this was changed when things changed that I won't spoil in case you haven't seen it. Now Happy then gets to show off his boxing prowess, and we journey to Tony's Miami Beach house. Killmonger is appointed as the new COO, much to Pepper's disapproval, and she of course went on to get this position in Iron Man 3. Rhodey arrives and we see him played by Don Cheadle rather than Terrence Howard, who of course took the role in the original film. He brings up that Killmonger was from Oakland, which is where we were introduced to the character at the start of Black Panther. They travel into Tony's garage and we see the set of sports cars that he has, including the hot rod on the end, which would go on to inspire the colours of the Iron Man armour. We discover that he's been working on repulsor tech, but rather than being for his suit, it's for a Jericho missile which has been miniaturized into a portable firearm. See women, size does matter. Yet sometimes the smaller the better. Now Killmonger brings up his father's catchphrase that peace means having a bigger stick than the other guy, which Tony mentioned during the first Iron Man film. Now as my wife says, sometimes it's better to have a smaller stick, Paul, and we see Dummy come in and grab the gun off him. See, Dummy knows as well. Now Dummy was actually Tony's first invention, and it was a cool bit of comedic relief throughout the Iron Man trilogy. Killmonger says that his father was killed by gang violence, and later we see he kept his ring, but rather than having it on show, he hid it away so that questions wouldn't be asked about it. In Black Panther he has it on show at all times, but this changing highlights that his mind state has changed, and he's somewhat hidden his motives away in order to infiltrate Wakanda through different means. We never learn whether he actually knows the truth about his father, but due to his actions, I kinda get the feeling that he does. Now he inspires Tony to create a drone army, and as Ivan Vonko said, drone better. Clearly the idea of drones was matched by Vonko, who shared similar technological skills to Tony, and I like this as somewhat a callback to Iron Man 2 to show us where the weapons technology would have gone had Tony not become Iron Man. We see Killmonger's design for this, which looks like it was ripped right out of Gundam, and Tony creates a more efficient bot. Now you might catch that the character is starting to drink more and more, and this idea of Tony being an alcoholic is ripped right out of the pages of Demon in a Bottle. In that, Tony became dependent on alcohol, and though the MCU dealt somewhat with his mental health issues in Iron Man 3, they never out and out painted him out to be an alcoholic. What I appreciate about What If is that even though it's a cartoon, they still go after dark themes, and there's a lot of subtext to Tony constantly ordering drinks. We see him taking the design apart, and the scene massively mirrors him creating the Iron Man suit. They even have an operations test, which feels like it's ripped right out of Tony testing the flight pattern of the Mark II. Jarvis will be put in control of the drones, and this is somewhat this timeline's version of him getting to be in a synthetic body. Tony theorizes building a miniature arc reactor, but he shuts the idea down, and Killmonger ends up using his father's ring, which is made of vibranium. Tony says his father used the last of it during the war, and this was of course to make Cap's shield in the first Avenger. It wasn't really the last of it, but Wakanda hid away their source, and this is why Klaw ended up attacking the country so that he could get more. They scan the ring, and this creates a circular mesh that breaks down its elemental structure. Something similar appeared in Iron Man 2 when Tony was creating a new element, and it's sort of like poetry, they rhyme. Now realizing they need more, they reach out to Klaw, who is operating out of the salvage yard on the African coast that we first saw pop up in Age of Ultron. It's at this point that the US military start dealing with black market sellers, and this is the type of thing that Tony wanted to avoid in the first Iron Man film. In Age of Ultron, we learn that Klaw knew Tony due to the machine's speech patterns, and it turns out Klaw has a wealth of vibranium, including not only a Dora Milaje spear, but also several containers of the stuff. At this moment the lights go down, and it's when Black Panther rolls into town, taking everyone out one by one, including Klaw's right hand man, who you might recognise from Age of Ultron. This scene, including the flashlights and the firing on T'Challa, feels like it's ripped right out of the opening of Black Panther, and it's such a cool action scene in the middle of the episode. Now it is kind of heartbreaking as well, and Chadwick was of course severely ill at this point, but still pushing through even though every day would have been extremely painful. What If has managed to be the perfect way to say goodbye to his character, and he's left behind several brilliant performances in the series. Killmonger calls him Cuz, and the pair were of course cousins, and he then unleashes the paralysing sonic taser, which Obadiah had a miniature version of in Iron Man 1. Killmonger kills T'Challa and reveals his true plans before making a union with Klaw, much like how he did in the MCU. Turns out that he's been using Tony's wealth and privilege to open doors that he never could, and he's been working his own agenda in order to overthrow Wakanda. T'Challa and Rhodey's body are taken away, and we see the similarities between the fallen soldier coffins, which are carried by soldiers of their country. We see King T'Chaka, Ramonda, and also a younger Shuri. Now in the timeline we were in 2008, rather than 2016, which is when I think Black Panther took place. I'm not too sure, as Homecoming kinda messed everything up, and yeah, screw you Sony, screw you. Now we also see General Ross meeting Rhodey's coffin, and you will of course know him from several films in the MCU. T'Chaka goes to the UN, and this is similar to the post-credit scene of Black Panther. It also riffs slightly on Civil War, as he did go to the UN, but he was murdered, whereas here he just gets to go home, which is it's probably better for the guy. Now it's here that we see Tony has discovered what Killmonger is up to, and he uses the same holographic technology that appeared in Iron Man 3. Killmonger arrives to take him out in his own home, and this was somewhat mirrored in Obadiah, who did the same thing in the first Iron Man film. This time Tony is prepared though, and we watch as he activates his own quote-unquote Iron Man to kill Killmonger. Much in the same way that Tony was able to scan Cap's fight pattern in Civil War, the drone can do the same, but it doesn't prove to be much use. Killmonger says he's gonna have to freestyle it, and his shirt is ripped off, revealing the marks that he made for every confirmed kill. There's actually a lot less here than he had in Black Panther, and this is obviously because it takes place earlier in the timeline than the MCU one. Using the vibranium spear, he impales Tony and does a nice pun about how he didn't want him to make the cut. You might also notice that Tony has a bracelet on, and this is similar to the one that he had in the Avengers to line up his suit to his body. I'm guessing that this was used to summon the drone, and it's great that Marvel managed to show he was already thinking of automating this early on. Killmonger drops the great line, "The difference between you and me is that you can't see the difference between you and me." Killmonger of course said, "Just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships because they knew that death was better than bondage." He gets all the good lines, and for me it's up there next to things like, "What is grief if not love persevering?" and of course, "Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning?" Now it's at this moment that the Watcher stares over everything, and we see that Killmonger pins it on the Wakandans, which leads to the US government going to war with them. Every asset that Stark has is seized, and the drones are mass produced, which builds Killmonger an army that can take down the Wakandan kingdom. With Claw, he travels into the jungle, which is where the holographic entrance is revealed. Claw calls Killmonger boy, and this is often deemed as a racist term, as throughout history white people have used the phrase when talking to black people to suggest that they weren't on equal footing. Much in the same way that Killmonger took Claw's corpse into Wakanda to infiltrate their security, he carries him through after murdering him at point blank range, like how he did in Black Panther. He also shows the tattoo under his lip, and this is something that he did in Black Panther to reveal to Claw the truth. He's taken before the king, and we can catch Okoye to the right hand side. Okoye is the only Dora Milaje member to wear gold, and this is because she is the bodyguard for the king. It's at this point that TChalla reveals that he kept Killmonger hidden, and this action of course came back to bite the Wakandans in Black Panther, much like how it does here. Similar to how he did with Tony, he's now operating as somewhat of a Trojan horse, and hiding his true intentions. He lied about his father being murdered by a gang, and TChalla clearly only accepts him because he believes he doesn't know the truth. Shuri is the only one who suspects anything, and this somewhat plays into the ending. Now the drones roll in, and we see a very similar battle play out to what happened at the end of Infinity War. Their power is seemingly destroyed, but this is actually a ruse by Killmonger, who starts them up, and I think that this time they might be under his control. They never confirm that, but that's just kind of what I take from this final battle. Now it leads to an epic third act, in which Killmonger rides into battle against the drones on the back of a rhino. These were of course used in the finale of Black Panther, and if I'm correct in my theory, then Eric can't lose because the drones are of course under his command. It's very much a false flag attack that paints him out as a hero, and he saves Okoye's life, which wins the trust of the Wakandans. The drones are destroyed, and Killmonger stabs one through the Stark logo, surmising the destruction of his legacy. We cut to the Wakandan sunset, and in Black Panther, Killmonger remarked on how his father said that they had the most beautiful ones in the world, whereas in that he died whilst looking over them. In this, it's the beginning of a new chapter in his life. He convinces TChalla that he should reach out to their brothers and sisters who are in dire need across the world, and the king agrees with him. This was of course his plan in Black Panther, but going about this way has worked out way better for him. He becomes the Black Panther and is given the herb that allows him to have the power. On the ancestral plane he sees the spirit of TChalla, who appears in his white garb, much like how he did in Black Panther. The pair debate back and forth, and it really shows the difference between their mind states as we watch Killmonger suit up in the gold uniform that he had on in that movie. We see Tony's image is used in a memorial, and similar things of course happen in Far From Home, in which he became an inspiring figure due to his sacrifice. The poster says, "Only you can avenge Tony Stark," and no prizes for guessing the wordplay there. Now Pepper sees the folly in attacking Wakanda, and she finds Shuri in her office, who of course suspected that her cousin wasn't all that he seemed to be. Now we know from the teasers for What If that Shuri and Pepper will be working together, so expect to see a continuation of this story at some point in the season. Now if you've been checking out the trailers for What If, then you'll know there's a big Avengers Assemble moment with several of the characters from across the series. Amongst these you can catch Party Thor, T'Challa, Thanora, and lastly Killmonger in his own Black Panther uniform. I think that the series is clearly heading towards a big team up moment that will pull a character from each episode and have them come together in order to face off against one giant threat. We already know from the first look that the strange Supreme version of the Doc will be meeting Captain Carter at some point, and it just makes a lot of sense to have everyone team up to defeat a giant multiversal enemy that could destroy everything. Now there was a big episode list leak when the season first started off that said which episodes had which concept, and what order they would be coming in. Last week's was actually listed as being Party Thor, and because this was wrong, I thought that the list might be made up. However, it did state that episode 6 would be the Killmonger one, so bar that episode, it's got everything right. The list stated that the final episode would be an Ultron Infinite one, and judging by the Hyundai commercial, we have a legion of Ultron bots that the heroes are teaming up to destroy. Now again, the list so far has got everything right except the Party Thor one, but that does mean there's potential that it could be wrong. However, judging by everything that's going on around the series, it does seem pretty accurate. Now there are rumours that Disney weren't getting the expected viewership for the series, so after the Doctor Strange one, they moved the zombie episode up to help create some hype. I still think that it's all heading towards a big team up because, well, we've seen the trailers, but whether the Ultron thing is true or not remains to be seen. However, I'd love to see this Killmonger amongst the ranks, as he's such a great character. Marvel are of course known for building their teams up bit by bit, and not only does it look like they're doing that with the Dark Avengers, but also the What If heroes, which I think will work really well. Now as for my thoughts on the episode, as a whole I think this probably ranks amongst the middle of the list for me. Zombies was probably my favourite, with the Doctor Strange episode in a very close second. However, this one was good, and I think it's probably better than all the ones below it. I can't believe it's been 6 weeks now and the series has flown by, but I've really enjoyed it. I don't know if I'm going to include everything in my bi-monthly MCU binge, but I do think there are some episodes, this one included, that I'll go back to every time as it worked really well. If Tony's destiny was changed early on, then it has massive ramifications on the MCU, and outside of the zombies episode, this is the one that I really hope gets somewhat of a continuation in the second season. Now before we close up the video, quick spoiler alert for some new leaks on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. If you want to dive out the vid, then please hit the thumbs up on the way out, and don't let the door hit you on the way back next week, you sucker. Anyway, there's been a big plot leak for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and it says that America Chavez will be in the film and that she will have the ability to open portals across the multiverse. She will apparently come from a dimension in which she's chased by an evil Doctor Strange, who is none other than What If's Strange Supreme. Now we did talk about an interview with Benedict Cumberbatch last week, in which he had to hide his face because he had some spoilers for the film on it, and now knowing what we do, I think it makes a lot of sense that this would be Strange Supreme. Anyway, that's just a minor little update on what's happening with the ongoing story, and I'd of course love to hear your thoughts on it and the brand new episode of What If. Make sure you drop them below, and as a thank you, you'll be entered into a competition in which we're giving away 3 copies of the Zack Snyder DC trilogy on the 30th of September. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the episode. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of the Hawkeye trailer, which will be linked on screen right now. We pointed out all the little Easter eggs and the cool callbacks to the comics, so it's definitely worth checking out if you're interested in that series. If not, then thank you for sitting through this video. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.